Imagine yourself traveling back in time, long before steam trains, to a Europe still marked by castles, feudal lands, and endless, muddy roads. Mining was the lifeblood of many regions, but moving tons of coal or ore across steep slopes and waterlogged paths was an almost impossible challenge. It was in this setting that one of the most ingenious inventions of the Middle Ages appeared: the first wooden tracks, known as wagonways. They were nothing more than reinforced paths, where carts with wheels were pulled by horses, or even by men, sliding far more easily than on uneven dirt roads. Friction was reduced, loads increased, and suddenly, what once took days could be accomplished in just a few hours. These rudimentary tracks were the true ancestors of modern railways, born not out of luxury, but from the urgent need to move hidden riches from deep underground to markets and ports. It connected coal mines to the village of Wollaton, and its existence represented more than a practical solution. It was a sign that humanity was ready to transform the way the world moved. Picture long planks of wood laid in order, creaking under the weight of carts overflowing with coal, slowly pulled by panting horses. The metallic clatter of wheels striking the track sounded like a primitive music, a prelude to what, centuries later, would become the thunder of steam locomotives. At the time, no one could imagine that these simple wooden paths would spark a global revolution in transport. But there, between coal and timber, the first sketch of what would forever change the speed of history was being drawn. Over time, human ingenuity could no longer be satisfied with the fragile wooden tracks. They wore out quickly, snapped under heavy loads, and demanded constant maintenance. That was when the transition to something far more resilient began: iron rails. Imagine the impact of such a change, replacing wood so vulnerable to weather and pressure with bars of cast iron and later wrought iron. This technological leap not only increased the durability of the pathways, but also allowed for the transport of ever heavier loads, while dramatically reducing friction. To keep pace with this evolution, wheels were also redesigned. Flanged wheels emerged, fitting neatly into the rails and preventing carts from veering off course. The result was faster, more stable, and more reliable transport, opening up new possibilities for trade and exploration. During this period, horses pulling carriages laden with coal, timber, or ore. In some regions, daring engineers experimented with other sources of energy: water wheels powering mine tracks, or even conveyor-like mechanisms to aid movement. It was as if humanity were testing every single piece of the puzzle that would later assemble into the modern train. Cast iron railways transformed mines and industries, multiplying productivity and feeding the furnaces of the Industrial Revolution that was just around the corner. Every spark of progress revealed that the world was on the verge of acceleration, and the horses, though still the driving force of the era, already hinted that they would soon be replaced by something infinitely more powerful. The early 19th century brought a turning point that would forever change the history of transportation: the rise of the steam locomotive. In the heart of Cornwall, a British region known for its mines and daring engineers, a man named Richard Trevithick set out to challenge the limits of technology. He had already been working on steam engines that were more compact and powerful than the massive stationary machines used to pump water from mines. But Trevithick, envisioned something greater. What if this power could move along rails? In 1804, his vision took form in the penny darren, the world's first steam locomotive, to haul heavy loads and even passengers over a rail track. Imagine the astonishment of miners and onlookers as they watched that iron beast belch smoke, panting steam as it dragged wagons full of coal without a single horse. It was like witnessing the birth of a giant that until then had lived only in imagination. The experiment, carried out in South Wales, proved the idea was possible, but also revealed its initial flaws. The cast iron rails were not built to bear such weight, and often cracked under the locomotive's impact. Yet the penny darren still managed to travel nearly 15 kilometers, transporting more than 10 tons of iron, along with several passengers. It was an unprecedented feat, a milestone that showed the world steam power could replace horses and pave the way for faster, more efficient transport. Although Trevithick never reaped the commercial rewards of his invention, later overshadowed by names like George Stephenson, his boldness lit the flame that would fuel the entire railway revolution. On that day in 1804, amid gears, smoke, and the acrid scent of burning coal, the locomotive was born, an invention that would forever change the very speed of history. After Trevithick's first experiments, what the world needed was someone who could turn that daring idea into something practical, reliable, and scalable. That someone was George Stephenson, a self-taught engineer who grew up in the coal mines and knew firsthand the struggles of transportation. He not only built more efficient locomotives, such as the famous Blucher, but also devoted himself to improving the rails and the entire infrastructure needed to support the weight and speed of these new machines. Stephenson had a vision for the future. He realized that steam power should not serve only to transport coal, but also people. With his charisma and persuasive skill, he convinced investors and authorities that passenger railways could transform both the economy and society. In 1825, this dream took shape with the inauguration of the Stockton and Darlington Railway. Stephenson's locomotion number 1 pulled wagons packed with passengers on a historic journey that marked the first public steam-powered railway for people. But the true leap forward would come 5 years later, in 1830, with the opening of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway. This was the first line to connect two industrial cities with a fully modern railway, operating exclusively with steam locomotives. The impact was immediate. Goods and people began to move at a pace never before imagined, bringing regions closer, accelerating trade, and changing the daily lives of thousands. What had begun as an experiment in the mines had become a social revolution. The whistle of the locomotive echoed not only along the tracks, but also in the heart of a new era, where time and distance were finally being conquered by the power of steam. The roar of the first locomotives was not confined to British soil. Soon, the innovation crossed borders and spread across the globe, adapting to different local realities and needs. In Russia, for instance, the engineers Cherepanov built the country's first steam locomotives in 1834, primarily used in mining industries to transport coal and ore across regions where transport had been slow and costly. The British model served as inspiration, but each nation shaped its trains according to its geography and available resources. Stronger rails were required in mountainous areas, while smaller locomotives were suited for shorter routes or tight curves. Heated debates arose over the ideal track width, the famous gauge, which varied from region to region, and over the most efficient fuels, whether coal, wood, or, in later cases, oil. This global diffusion was not merely a matter of engineering. It became a matter of cultural and political identity. Every country saw railways not only as tools of economic progress, but also as symbols of power and modernity. In the United States, lines expanded coast to coast, connecting territories and accelerating westward expansion. In Brazil, the first railways emerged in the 19th century to transport coffee, shaping the economy and the growth of cities. In India, the British Empire used railways as instruments of control and territorial integration, creating an immense network that spanned the subcontinent. Everywhere in the world, locomotives adapted to local conditions, but carried the same spirit: the promise of shortening distances and accelerating life itself. In this way, the British invention became global, a thread of iron and smoke stitching nations together and mapping the roots of modernity. The advancement of railways did not happen by chance. It was shaped by rivalries, challenges, and an unrelenting race for innovation. One of the most emblematic moments in this evolution was the Rainhill Trials in 1829, a competition that became a turning point in the history of transportation. The challenge was simple, yet decisive: to select the best locomotive to operate on the newly constructed Liverpool and Manchester Railway. Numerous engineers presented their machines, each offering ingenious solutions to handle speed, power, and durability. Among them, the legendary rocket by George Stephenson stood out, astonishing observers with its remarkable speed for the time, while maintaining stable performance throughout the course. Its victory not only secured a contract, but also established technical standards that would define locomotives for years to come. The Rainhill Trials demonstrated from that point onward, improvements surged: more efficient tubular boilers, optimized fuel supply systems, reinforced wheels and rails, and even debates about aerodynamics, something unthinkable at the time. Each innovation aimed not only to increase speed, but also to enhance safety and load capacity. It was as if the railway had become a massive open-air laboratory where engineers competed to push the boundaries of what was possible. These contests created a cascading effect. The faster and more reliable locomotives became, the more cities demanded their own lines, more investors funded projects, and more nations saw iron and steam as the path to the future. Competitions like Rainhill were not merely spectacles. They were the spark that forever redefined railway transportation.